18 years ago, my husband, Anthony Jackson, and his lover, Abegail Owens, died in a car accident. The news shattered me. In the wreckage, they left behind not only broken promises, but also a pair of unborn twins, Abigail's children, not mine. Despite everything, I made a choice no one could understand. I chose to keep them. Back then, people called me a fool. My parents begged me to reconsider. Friends turned their backs. The Jackson family remained silent, unsure of how to respond. But I was determined. I raised Michael and Maxwell as my own, loved them with every fiber of my being, and poured my soul into giving them the life they deserved. 18 years passed in the blink of an eye. I stood in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, when I heard the thundering footsteps from the study. "Mom! Mom!" Michael's voice came first. "Maxwell and I, we did it! We got into Ivy League colleges!" Maxwell shouted, his voice brimming with joy. They barreled into the kitchen, arms wide, eyes gleaming, acceptance letters in hand. They were tall now, both towering over me, and yet, in that moment, they were still my boys. They pulled me into a hug, laughter ringing in the air. I wrapped my arms around them, tears pooling in my eyes as I smiled up at them. "You both are amazing. I'm so proud of you." My heart swelled with pride. All the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the loneliness, it was all worth it. But the joy didn't last long. That evening, as I wiped down the countertop, the impossible happened. The doorbell rang. I opened the door, and there they stood. Anthony and Abegail, alive. Anthony's hair was grayer, his eyes more tired, but unmistakably him. Abegail, radiant and poised, clung to his arm like a trophy. My heart froze. Abegail smiled sweetly, stepping forward. "Thanks to your efforts, our sons made it to the Ivy Leagues. We couldn't have enjoyed ourselves all these years if you hadn't taken care of them." Anthony nodded. "It's time we make things right. I want a divorce. I want to be with Abegail." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I looked at them both, my lips curling into a faint smile. "You're 18 years too late." 2 days later, the boys' 18th birthday arrived. I had planned something grand this year, not just to celebrate their birthday, but their graduation and their Ivy League admission. I booked the ballroom at the most prestigious hotel in the city. I shared the news in the Jackson family group chat. The chat exploded with messages. "Michael and Maxwell are so awesome. If Anthony knew how successful his sons were, he'd be so proud." I skimmed through the noise, posted the party details, and silenced the group. That morning, I arrived early at the hotel to oversee the final preparations. Everything had to be perfect. The tables were decorated with blue and gold, symbolizing knowledge and honor. A photo wall displayed the boys' journey from infancy to now, each memory a piece of my heart. Most of the guests were from the Jackson family. My parents didn't come. They had never forgiven me for raising Abigail's children. Even after all this time, they believed I had wasted my life. At 10 a.m., the guests began arriving. Anthony's parents, Richard and Sophia, were ushered in with great care. They made their way to the main table where Anthony's brother, sister, and their families sat. There were 8 seats. 8 for them, none for me. I busied myself, moving between tables, pouring wine, offering dishes, checking on the cake. I watched as Richard and Sophia cooed over the boys, fussing over how tall they were, how handsome they'd become. "Michael and Maxwell, come sit here and talk to us," Sophia called, patting the seat between her and Richard. "They look just like Abegail," Anthony's brother murmured, before being silenced by a sharp glare from Sophia. I said nothing. I smiled politely, my hands shaking as I refilled a glass. I had given everything to raise those boys, and now I stood at the edge of the celebration like a hired server. Michael and Maxwell exchanged glances. Without a word, they got up and dragged a chair to the center of the table, between them. "Mom," Michael called, walking over. "Sit with us." "Yes, Mom," Maxwell echoed, pulling me by the hand. Our birthday is your day of suffering. You deserve to be here more than anyone." They sat me between them like a queen on a throne. For the first time that day, I allowed myself to cry. Through blurry eyes, I saw the Jackson family fall silent. Richard shifted uncomfortably. Sophia looked away. Michael raised his glass. "To our mom, the woman who gave up everything and never gave up on us. We're here because of her." Maxwell joined in. "You're our real mom. Always were, always will be." The hall erupted in applause. Some guests cried. Others looked stunned. But in that moment, I knew. I had already won. Not because of Anthony, not because of forgiveness or vindication, but because the two lives I raised had turned into men who knew love, loyalty, and gratitude. And that was the greatest victory of all. "Sit down and take a rest." That simple statement shifted the atmosphere in the room. Lydia smirked, breaking the silence with a voice laced with condescension. "Hannah, my brother would be thrilled to see his sons raised so well by you." Richard coughed lightly, a calculated interruption that silenced her. Sophia leaned in, her eyes gleaming. "Hannah, today is such a beautiful day, and I have something I'd like to discuss with you." "Go ahead," I replied, keeping my tone polite. Sophia straightened, smoothing her dress with practiced grace. "With Michael and Maxwell heading off to college soon, that 3-bedroom apartment will be much too big for you. So Richard and I thought, we'll move in once they're gone. I'll cook for you while you focus on work." So that was her plan. They didn't know I already saw it coming. The apartment, technically a small house, had been bought with a down payment from my parents. The intent was to add my husband Anthony's name to the deed eventually. But 6 months into our marriage, he took a drive with Abegail. They never returned. A fatal accident left nothing behind but ashes and grief. After his death, I continued the mortgage on my own. My parents helped me with some payments in the beginning, but in the end, the property was solely in my name. I worked day and night to raise my boys, Michael and Maxwell, alone. Now, as my sons prepared to leave for their Ivy League futures, it was clear Richard and Sophia had begun eyeing the house like vultures circling. They never saw it as my home, only as something to claim. "Mom," I began gently, "it's not that I won't let you live there. But with Michael and Maxwell going abroad, it doesn't make sense to keep such a big space. I've already sold the house. I'm moving into a 1-bedroom apartment. The rest of the money will go toward their education." Richard's face turned ghostly pale. He slammed his hand against the table. "As a member of the Jackson family, why didn't you discuss this with us? I thought we were family." "I'm doing this for Anthony's children," I replied, feigning surprise at his outburst. Richard's jaw clenched. "And the money from the sale?" "You can give it to Sophia," he added. "She'll save it for you. We all know how you spend money. You can't be trusted with large sums." I felt a familiar sting. This wasn't the first time they tried to control me through guilt and manipulation. In the past, I stayed silent to avoid arguments, for the sake of the boys. But now, their tone made it clear. I was no longer useful. The boys were grown. I was expendable. "I've already spoken to my lawyer," I said calmly. "The funds have been placed into a secured growth trust. Michael and Maxwell will receive $10,000 a month, every month, until they turn 25. Richard's furrowed brow finally relaxed, but his tone was still cold. "At least you're thinking ahead. For the grandchildren. There's no need to buy a house. Just rent. Don't waste the money." Soon after, the hotel manager approached with a microphone in hand. "Ms. Hannah," he said, "as the mother of the graduates, would you like to say a few words? Today is both their birthday and their graduation party." I took the microphone, straightening my back as I stepped to the front. The room quieted. "Thank you all for attending this special day. Today we celebrate Michael and Maxwell, my sons, our sons, who have been accepted into Ivy League universities. It is a day of pride, joy, and deep gratitude. But also, it is bittersweet. because on such an important day, it's only natural to wish their biological parents were here too. Before I could finish, a loud commotion broke through the hall. The door slammed open. Gasps echoed. A man and a woman stood at the entrance. I froze. Despite the 18 years that had passed, I recognized them instantly. Anthony and Abegail, my late husband, and the woman who died with him. The room buzzed with whispers and confusion. My heart thundered in my chest. At the main table, Richard and Sophia didn't react with shock or joy. They calmly rose to their feet and motioned Abegail over. She joined them as though she belonged, like she had never been gone. Anthony walked toward me slowly. His face, aged but unmistakable, held no remorse. "Hannah," he said, "you may not have been a good wife, but you've been a good mother." Michael and Maxwell, who had finally broken free from their stunned silence, looked around in disbelief. "What's going on?" Maxwell asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Anthony turned to them and pointed to Abegail. "This is your biological mother. Hannah couldn't have children. If she hadn't refused to divorce me and threatened suicide, none of this would have happened. Our family was torn apart because of her." Before I could speak, the Jackson relatives stirred and voiced agreement. "He's right. She didn't want you to know the truth. You owe her nothing. She kept you from your real parents." I stood frozen, my grip tightening on the microphone. My throat burned with words I couldn't force out. Anthony continued, "But now you're grown. You've been admitted to the Ivy Leagues. We can finally be a family again." Michael and Maxwell stood frozen, unsure of how to react. Their eyes darted between me and the woman who had just burst into their lives. Abegail clutched their hands with trembling fingers and, through her sobs, shoved her phone toward them. On the screen, a message glared. "I'm your biological mother. I send you gifts every year," Abegail choked out. "I even sneak in to see you after school. I've watched you grow, from afar, always." Then she turned to me with tears staining her cheeks and whispered, "Hannah, thank you for raising my 2 sons so well." Before I could respond, Anthony stepped forward and slung a possessive arm around Abigail's shoulders. His voice, drenched in sarcasm and smug satisfaction, cut through the air. "After 18 years, I'm finally marrying Abegail. You and I, we're done." Dozens of Jackson family members watched the drama unfold, their expressions a cocktail of curiosity, judgment, and anticipation. They waited, expecting I'd collapse in grief or explode in fury. But instead I laughed. A soft, unexpected laugh that silenced the room. "All right," I said, raising my chin. "I agree. I'll file for divorce tomorrow. You can reunite your little family." Gasps echoed in the room. Eyes widened. Even Anthony and Abegail blinked in disbelief. "You're serious?" Anthony asked, stepping back. "Are you out of your mind?" I met his gaze head on. "What? You're not happy about it?" Abegail, sensing a shift, clung to Anthony's arm. "She might change her mind. Just make her sign it now." Without hesitation, Anthony pulled a pre-prepared divorce agreement from his briefcase, something he had clearly planned for. "Here," he sneered. "Sign it. From now on, Michael and Maxwell have nothing to do with you. You won't be allowed to see them again. Ever." The word stung, but I signed. Michael and Maxwell's faces crumpled in pain. "Mom," Michael whispered, his voice breaking. You don't want us anymore?" Maxwell clutched his brother's arm, confused and heartbroken. "Why are you letting us go so easily?" Abegail tucked the signed document into her purse and grinned. "Thank you, Hannah, for making us whole. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have been so carefree, knowing our sons were well taken care of." She looked proudly at Michael and Maxwell. "Look at them. So tall, so handsome, so ours." Richard, Anthony's uncle, waved me off with a bored expression. "All right, enough. You've done your part. Just go." But I didn't move. Instead, I smiled. A different smile this time, calm, cold, and calculated. "Now that the agreement is signed," I said, "it's time I tell you the truth." Abigail's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath. the weight of 18 years lifting from my chest. It's over. Finally. I clapped my hands. The heavy oak doors at the end of the grand hall swung open. 2 figures stepped inside. A woman in her early 50s, dressed in a sharp black suit, her eyes cold and commanding. Beside her, a man with salt and pepper hair, holding a leather briefcase and walking with the quiet confidence of someone used to winning. The Jackson family murmured in confusion. Whispers flew. Who are they? I turned to face them all, my voice steady. Let me introduce you. This is Judge Evelyn Morales, and this is my attorney, Mr. Lance Whitmore. Abigail's smile faltered. Anthony stiffened. What is this, Hannah? He barked. Why are there legal people here? I tilted my head slightly, voice soft but unyielding. You thought you were reclaiming a family. But in truth, I've been preparing for this moment for years. Judge Morales stepped forward, holding a folder thick with legal documents. Mr. Jackson, Miss Owens, she said firmly. This is a sealed court order and paternity report, filed 18 years ago. The room froze. She continued, It confirms that Michael and Maxwell are not your biological children. A pin could have dropped. Abigail's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. That's not true. What are you talking about? Lance opened his briefcase and pulled out additional documents. After your car accident and once the children were safe, Hannah had the embryos genetically tested. He looked up at Anthony with a raised brow. The results were never shared with your family due to the trauma Hannah endured. But the truth is, those embryos, they weren't yours. Anthony staggered back, pale as a ghost. That's impossible. No, I said quietly. It's not. You and Abigail were both declared sterile. Years of drug use, reckless behavior, medical complications. You couldn't have children. Abigail let out a shriek. No, you're lying. Judge Morales turned a page. Not only are you not their biological parents, but the paternity report also confirms that Hannah is the legal and biological mother. The embryos used were a match to her DNA. Michael stepped forward, eyes wide. Wait, you're our real mom? I looked at my boys, my sons, and nodded, tears threatening to fall. Yes, baby. I've always been your mother. Anthony lunged toward the documents, but Lance blocked him calmly. The divorce agreement is null and void, Judge Morales declared. Filed under deception, coercion, and fraudulent claim of parentage, and pending further legal action, Hannah remains the sole guardian of Michael and Maxwell. Abigail collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Anthony stared at me with disbelief, as if seeing me for the first time. But I was done playing their game. I reached for Michael and Maxwell's hands. Let's go home, I said. They followed me without hesitation. And for the first time in 18 years, I felt truly free. The doctor had known all along. He had used Anthonymo donors. I found out when the boys were still infants. But I made a choice then, to never tell you. I believed it wouldn't matter, especially if you were gone. Abigail stood up abruptly, trembling. You're lying. I'm not, I replied calmly. I gave a small nod to Judge Morales, who stepped forward and handed thick folders to the Jacksons. They hesitated, flipping them open. Inside were detailed records, bank transfers under false names, gifts sent anonymously, photos taken near school playgrounds, notes scribbled in obsessively neat handwriting. Everything is documented, Evelyn said beside me, her voice steady and cold. And as of today, a restraining order has been officially granted. Abigail Jackson, you are to have no contact with Michael or Maxwell, directly or indirectly. Abigail screamed and lunged forward, wild-eyed, but 2 hotel security guards were already moving. They intercepted her, gripping her arms tightly as she thrashed and shouted. Anthony's face had gone pale, his eyes wild with disbelief. You can't do this to us, he hissed. I turned toward Michael and Maxwell, both standing rigid near the edge of the hall. Their expressions were tight, their eyes full of disbelief and confusion. But behind that, there was something else. Relief. You asked me if I didn't want you anymore, I said, my voice cracking. The truth is, I've never stopped wanting you. Never. But I had to protect you. I've always been protecting you." Maxwell stepped forward, fists clenched. You knew all of this. You planned it?" "I prepared for the worst," I admitted, "but I always hoped I'd never have to use it." Michael's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Mom," he whispered, "it's you. You're our mom." Abigail's shriek still echoed through the ballroom. "They're mine! You took them from me!" "No," I said firmly, locking eyes with her as the guards pulled her toward the exit. "You gave them up the day you chose to leave this world behind. And I made sure you'd never be able to claim them again. Not as a memory, not as a shadow." The guards escorted Abigail and Anthony out. Their cries grew fainter with each step, until the doors slammed shut behind them. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. Richard Jackson stood, visibly shaking. "You tricked us," he accused. I met his gaze, expressionless. "You used me for 18 years. But the game's over now. You'll never see my sons again." Michael and Maxwell moved closer to me, one on each side. They were taller than me now, grown men, but still my boys. Maxwell looked around the stunned hall and said loudly, "I don't care whose blood runs through our veins. She's our mother." Michael nodded. "And we're done with the Jacksons." And just like that, the power shifted. Not with a fight, not with a scream, but with truth. That quiet, unstoppable force that no lie could ever silence. 3 days later, the media exploded with headlines. Scandal at the Jackson estate. Photos from the birthday party turned courtroom-like confrontation flooded social media. Footage of Abigail being dragged out while screaming circulated like wildfire. The once gilded Jackson name, long respected in the city's business elite, became a joke. Investors backed out. Partnerships were dropped overnight. The empire crumbled, not from fire, but from rot exposed to daylight. As for me, I moved into a quiet stone cottage tucked just outside a small university town in Vermont, where Michael and Maxwell would be starting the next chapter of their lives. They came home on weekends, helped with groceries, cooked dinner, and filled the rooms with warmth and laughter I hadn't heard in years. One warm autumn evening, I stood on the porch sipping tea as the sun dipped behind the trees, setting the sky aflame with orange and gold. Maxwell joined me, leaning on the railing. "You knew they'd come back, didn't you?" I nodded, eyes on the horizon. "I didn't know how or when, but people like them, they never stay buried." Michael stepped outside, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. "Thanks for protecting us," he said softly. I smiled, feeling a peace I hadn't known in nearly 2 decades. "You two were always mine," I whispered. For the first time in 18 years, there were no more ghosts to run from, no threats lurking behind every shadow. Just family, real, unbreakable, and free. The cottage had long since become more than just a refuge. It was a home. Ivy crept along the railings, and the wildflower garden I had planted in that first spring bloomed in soft pastels come April and blazed in gold come October. Peace wasn't loud here. It was in the soft hush of morning fog, the chirp of sparrows, the clink of dishes during dinner, the scent of fresh-baked bread rising through the old chimney. Michael had gone on to become a respected investigative journalist, shining a light on injustice wherever he found it. Maxwell, ever the dreamer, opened his own architecture firm, designing homes that felt like havens. Their laughter still echoed through the kitchen. They still fought over board games and called me too often. But they were safe, happy. And I was no longer looking over my shoulder, no longer wondering if someone would come to take them from me. Because they were never stolen. They were saved. They still visited every weekend, just like they promised. My boys, though I never gave birth to them, I raised them with every breath I had. Sometimes they came with girlfriends, other times with wild stories from the cities they now called home. But they never stayed long. "It's too loud," Maxwell always said, brushing the city dust off his boots. "Too fake," Michael would mutter, sipping coffee on my porch like he'd never left. Despite their shiny jobs and fast-paced lives, they came back more than I ever expected. Not because they needed something, but because they knew where they truly belonged. Here, with me, where things were real. It was a crisp October afternoon. I was in the kitchen kneading dough, the scent of cinnamon and yeast rising into the air. Flour dusted my arms, soft like snowfall. The back door creaked open, and Michael walked in, his expression unreadable. "You got a letter," he said, holding a thick yellow envelope. His eyes were cautious, curious. I dried my hands on the towel and took it from him. Maxwell had followed, leaning against the counter, arms folded. I turned over the envelope. No return address I recognized. I opened it slowly, the paper rough under my fingertips. The letterhead read, Braxton and Langley Law Associates. I read aloud, "Dear Miss Hannah Jackson, we regret to inform you that Anthony Jackson passed away 3 months ago due to cardiac arrest in a private hospital in Nevada. Enclosed are documents pertaining to his estate, which, according to his final will, has been left entirely to Ms. Abegail Owens." My eyebrow lifted involuntarily. Of course it was Abegail. However, due to a pending lawsuit filed against both Mr. Jackson and Ms. Owens for fraud, identity theft, and breach of contract regarding the misuse of corporate and family trust funds, the estate is now under federal investigation. The court requests your presence as a historical legal guardian and the individual who raised Michael and Maxwell Jackson. I placed the letter on the table. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't flutter. I'd learned long ago not to let Anthony Jackson take up space in my body. Michael looked at me. "Do you want to be involved?" I shook my head. There's nothing left of them to touch us. Maxwell exhaled slowly, still leaning back against the kitchen counter. I heard Abegail fled the country when the charges came down. Last I checked, there's an active warrant out for her arrest. I nodded. "Some ghosts," I said quietly, "bury themselves." They exchanged a glance I didn't catch. Then Michael pulled out his phone, scrolling before showing me a picture. "Then maybe you'll like this," he said, eyes hopeful. "I'm writing a piece about women who raise children not born of them. I want you to be the first feature." I blinked. "Me?" "You're more than qualified," he said gently. Maxwell chimed in. "Mom, you're the reason we are who we are. The world should know your story." My knees creaked as I sat down, the warmth of the dough still on my palms. So many years had passed, so many choices, so many nights I cried in silence, unsure if I was enough. "If you're going to write it," I said softly, "tell it all, even the ugly parts, especially the parts where I was scared." Michael nodded. "That's exactly what makes you a hero." The fireplace crackled behind us as we spent the evening flipping through old photo albums. Birthdays, school plays, burnt Thanksgiving turkeys, snow angels. They laughed at their bowl haircuts and braces. I smiled at every sticky drawing I had kept tucked in boxes. Every letter, every little note, even baby teeth in envelopes marked with Sharpie. Our life wasn't built on blood. It was built on choice, on sacrifice, on love that never asked for anything in return, but gave everything it had. Months later, the article went viral. Letters poured in, from strangers, from women raising their sisters' children, from grandmothers parenting all over again, from foster mothers loving children who might never remember them. The title of the article? "The Woman Who Let Go and Found Everything." I never answered Abigail's subpoena. I never attended Anthony's funeral. There was no need. Their chapter in our story had ended long ago, and I had chosen peace. The chapter had closed long ago, or so I thought. I still visited a grave now and then. Not Anthony's. Never his. There was nothing there for me. No closure. No peace. Just the ghost of a man who'd already taken too much. Instead, I went where love still lived. To the resting place of the two people who taught me how to love in the first place. Eleanor and Thomas Daniels. My parents. My guides. I remember the air was crisp that morning, the sky a soft gray blanket. I held a bouquet of fresh marigolds, my mother's favorite, and laid them gently against the worn stone. Michael stood beside me, camera in hand, silent, respectful. Maxwell stepped to my other side and slipped his arm around my shoulder. The headstone was simple, just how they would have liked it. In loving memory of Eleanor and Thomas Daniels, who taught their daughter to stand tall even when standing alone. I knelt, pressing my fingers into the cold earth as if it could hold me together. I didn't do it perfectly, I whispered, but I did it. For a moment, the wind shifted through the trees, rustling the branches like a breath through time. A soft hush, almost like a reply. Yes, you did. I felt it. Not in my ears, but in my bones, like being hugged from somewhere beyond the veil. 3 weeks later, long after the article had gone viral, after the letters and the emails and the sudden flood of interviews and thank yous, something unexpected arrived. A letter, no return address from the press, no sweet thank you from a fellow guardian. It was crisp, white, and formal. Tucked inside was a message from a private investigator, discreet, respectful, almost apologetic in tone. But what it said, that one line at the bottom, typed in clean, sharp font, unraveled everything I thought I knew. Your sons were never the only ones Anthony Jackson left behind. I sat frozen at the kitchen table, reading it once, then again. My tea had gone cold. The world felt suddenly off balance. I opened the accompanying envelope with shaking fingers. Inside was a name, a location, a photograph of a girl no older than 22, and a DNA report, positive match, a third child, a daughter, born in secret, raised in silence, hidden not just from the world but from us, from Michael, from Maxwell, from me. Neither Anthony nor Abegail had ever mentioned her. Not a whisper, not a slip. My mind raced. Who was she? Where was she now? And most of all, why? Was she safe? Was she loved? Did she even know who she was? I clutched the paper to my chest, a familiar ache rising up in me. The same ache I'd felt when Michael first called me Mama, when Maxwell broke his arm and cried into my shirt, when I stayed up all night, wondering if I was enough for them. Now there was someone else, someone missing, and whether I liked it or not, this was no longer just a closed chapter. It was a new one waiting to be written. I didn't say anything right away. For 3 days, the envelope sat tucked beneath the bread box. A strange place to hide a secret, I know. But I needed to feel normal. I needed to hold on to the routine, even if it was slipping through my fingers like sand. I baked, cleaned, folded laundry that didn't need folding, stirred soup too long. Maxwell noticed I was quiet. Michael kept watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. They've always been good at reading me. I just wasn't ready to be read. But on the 4th evening, I couldn't carry it alone anymore. We were sitting around the fireplace, the house smelling like cinnamon and chamomile. Michael had his laptop out, editing a video. Maxwell was scrolling through his phone, occasionally laughing at something he'd never explain. I cleared my throat. "Boys," I said, and it came out too soft, too careful. They both looked up immediately. Michael closed the laptop. Maxwell's phone went dark. "I got a letter from a private investigator." Maxwell raised an eyebrow. "About the Jackson estate?" "No," I said, my voice steady but distant. "About Anthony." Michael straightened. "What now?" I reached for the envelope, hands trembling slightly. I placed the photo on the coffee table first. A girl. Dark eyes. Long hair pulled into a ponytail. She looked nothing like Abegail, but there was something in her jawline that reminded me of Maxwell. The same quiet determination. "That's her," I said. "Her name is Riley." "Who is she?" Maxwell asked, already leaning closer. I hesitated. "Your sister." The room went so still, I could hear the faint pop of the firewood. Michael blinked. "What?" I swallowed. Anthony had another child, a daughter, born in secret, raised away from all of this, away from us. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Michael looked at the photo again, slowly. Maxwell sat back like someone had knocked the air out of his chest. "She's real?" he asked. I nodded. There's a DNA test. It's legitimate. And a name, a location. She's living in Montana. Grew up with a different family. No connection to the Jacksons, at least not until now. Michael exhaled. Does she know about us? I don't think so, I said. The investigator wasn't hired by her. He found her after the article, after everything. Maxwell rubbed a hand over his face. So what do we do? I looked at both of them. My boys. The ones I chose. The ones who chose me. I don't know, I admitted. But I thought you deserved to know. You had a right. Michael nodded slowly. She's part of this story too, isn't she? She is, I whispered, even if none of us asked for it. The photo sat there between us like a flickering candle, small but undeniable. For the first time in a long time, I didn't have all the answers. But maybe we didn't need answers just yet. Maybe we just needed a beginning. Michael picked up the photo and studied it again. She looks strong, he said. She'd have to be, I murmured. She's a Jackson. And we sat there letting the silence wrap around us. A family, still learning what that word meant, even now. I didn't sleep that night. The letter, the photo, the name, all circled in my mind like a storm I couldn't outrun. The fear of what would happen next. The fear of meeting someone else who shared the blood of those I had once loved, despite their betrayals, despite their lies. I had spent so many years shutting out the past that the thought of letting it back in any form, made my chest tighten. But I couldn't stay here, frozen in this moment forever. By morning, I had made up my mind. I called the investigator first. His name was Stephen Hall, and he was polite, businesslike. He confirmed that Riley lived in a small town in Montana, working in a local bookstore. The report he'd sent me had been filed in accordance with the law, but Riley had no idea her identity had been connected to the Jacksons. You have to understand, Stephen had warned. She's never been involved in any of the family's problems. She was raised far from the mess of their lives. It's been kept from her. I exhaled slowly. Thank you, Mr. Hall. I'll take it from here. And so, after pacing the kitchen for what seemed like hours, I wrote her a letter. I introduced myself first, explaining that I was the woman who had raised Michael and Maxwell. I told her everything, about how Anthony Jackson had been her father, about the secrets that had been buried for too long, and about the choices I had made to protect my boys, choices I was proud of, no matter the cost. I told her I didn't know if she wanted to hear from me, and I didn't know if she would believe me. But the truth had a way of finding its way out, and I wasn't going to stand by while she was left to figure it out alone. I told her that if she wanted to, she could reach out to me. No pressure, no obligations, just a conversation. It wasn't a letter of invitation exactly, more of a letter of understanding, of offering a door she could walk through if she chose to. The next few days felt like the calm before a storm. The moment had passed, and now all I could do was wait. A week later, on a rainy Thursday morning, the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. For a long moment, I let it ring. Then I answered. Hannah Jackson? Yes, I said, my voice trembling despite myself. This is Riley. You wrote me a letter? My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't prepared for how much it would affect me to hear her voice. I did, I replied. I don't know if you... I read it, she said quickly. Well, I didn't believe it at first, but then I looked into it. And I don't know what to think, what to do. I closed my eyes, clutching the phone like it might slip from my hands. Riley, I didn't want to overwhelm you. I just wanted you to know the truth. I wanted you to know about your father, and that you're not alone. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I guess I always knew something was missing, she said quietly. I didn't have the Jacksons, but I had other people. Good people. My adoptive parents, they loved me. They gave me a good life. Riley, I'm glad you had that, but I want you to know that regardless of everything that's happened, I'm here now, and my sons, they're your brothers, if you want that. I don't know if I'm ready for that, she said softly, but I'm not angry with you or them. It's just a lot to take in. I understand, I whispered. Take all the time you need. You don't have to rush anything. Just know that we're here whenever you're ready." "Okay," she replied, her voice a little steadier now. "Maybe one day we could meet in person?" "I'd like that," I said, fighting back tears. "I'd really like that." The line went silent for a moment before she added, "Thank you for reaching out. I'll think about it." "Take your time," I repeated, feeling the weight lift slightly from my chest. As I hung up the phone, I realized something I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. Hope. A flicker. Soft, but there. It was hope that maybe, just maybe, the pieces could come together after all. The days that followed were quiet but heavy. I didn't know what the future held for Riley, for the boys, for me. But I knew this. Nothing would ever be the same again. And that was okay. We had all been through too much not to change. When Michael came home that weekend, he could see it in my face. "You talked to her, didn't you?" he asked. I nodded. Maxwell joined us at the table, his eyes bright. "What did she say?" "She's not sure about everything yet, but she doesn't hate us. She wants to meet one day." Michael smiled softly. "That's a start, Mom." And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. I don't know where Riley's story will go from here. I don't know if she'll ever truly accept me as family, or if she'll ever be part of what we have now. But I do know this. Family isn't about blood. It's about choice. And I chose them, all of them, with every part of me. The door was open now. What happens next is up to her. But as the sun dipped low behind the trees, casting long shadows over the cottage, I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't running from the past. I was walking into the future, one step at a time, with the ones I loved.